Linguistics Behind the Scenes.
What you always wanted to know about language and how to explore it.
With Christina Sanchez-Stockhammer.
And Dominic Piazza. Hi, Christina. Back again for another episode.
Yay, here we are. So, Dominic, on a recent episode, I asked you how your learning of German was going. So, have you got an update for me?
Yeah. You know, it moving along nicely as usual, but German is tricky. It has a reputation for being tricky, although in some ways I think the difficulty is overstated, but it's got some really tricky grammar.
Yeah, that's true. I'm so glad that I speak it naturally and don't have to think about it. Oh my God, all those cases and the different gendered articles. I'm so glad that I can just speak it like that.
Yeah, and the declensions and the three grammatical genders. It has a reputation for being really difficult. It's certainly more difficult than the Romance languages, I feel like. More difficult than maybe French or Spanish, but, not as hard as like Russian or Chinese or something. But yeah.
Well, that depends, It depends on whether you're a native speaker of Russian or Chinese, because obviously if you're born into a community that speaks those languages, you will feel it's easy for you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're totally right. It depends on what your first language is. So obviously here I'm speaking from the perspective of an English native speaker, but maybe if you were a Dutch speaker, German would be maybe the most straightforwardly easy language to learn because it's the most closely related language to Dutch and the grammar is largely shared and a lot of the vocabulary is shared. So yeah, definitely, you're right.
Yeah, I suppose it would be easier, even though I have to say if I think about Dutch, I'm not sure. I mean, if I tried to learn it, I suppose I would still need to learn a lot of things by heart. So in the end, having a lot of cases, having a lot of things like gender of articles, etc. to learn by heart, this is something that does make a language more difficult.
Oh, yeah, totally. Well, they say that Dutch is halfway between German and English. So I'm hoping that with knowledge of both German and English, maybe Dutch will be a slam dunk, but I haven't attempted it yet. But there's actually a feature that Dutch shares with German, which is really long words. German is notorious for this.
Yes.
It takes all the fall for it internationally for long words. But actually, as I've learned, Dutch also has long words.
Yeah. I'm sure they do. But yeah, I know the German reputation, of course. I mean, we have long compounds like Donaudampfschifffahrtsgesellschaftskapitänswitwenrente and things like that, which are contrived, but still it shows the principle. We can just string different words one after another, and in the end we get a very, very long compound.
Yes. Really long words like Generalstaatsverordnetenversammlungen or Unabhängigkeitserklärungen. To complete outsiders, to people with no knowledge of German, these words look really crazy because I think maybe they're imagining that all on its own it has a completely unique meaning, but actually it's just a noun compound. It's just many nouns put together with no spaces in between. And so as a German, when you know all of the component words, you just read them one after the other. It's actually not so bad.
No, it isn't. So in contrast to English, where you typically have spaces in longer compounds, in German, the general rule is that you just string everything together. I mean, you can also insert a hyphen occasionally, but let's say that the standard is that you just write everything together as a single sequence of letters, also when it's really long. But of course, these very, very long compounds, I mean, they're not so frequent in the language. So this is something that we are well known for. And there are some that are really used, like Bundesausbildungsförderungsgesetz. But very often we just use abbreviations for these very long ones.
Yeah, you're totally right. At least in my German learning, these super long words are usually things you only encounter in quite formal speech. Certainly, legal contexts, a lot of laws. A lot of the longest words in the German language are legal terms, and so legal terms are not an everyday occurrence. I would say, unless you're a lawyer, perhaps. But there's actually a very famous person, a very famous writer in the English-speaking world who took issue with the long words in German. Mark Twain,
Yes.
An American treasure, an American gem, one of our best. Have you read any Mark Twain?
Oh, yes, I have. As a child, I read Tom Sawyer. I found that really interesting. And I think the idea of making other people want to paint a fence for him and pay him to do so, I thought that was a really, really clever idea.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. I'm happy to hear that. He was many things beyond writing novels. He was a humorist, as they say. What a great word, a humorist. I would like to be a humorist. And he was very witty. It's actually to the point where you might know, like he is like very serially quotes are misattributed to him. Anything that's even remotely funny or witty, people will attribute to Mark Twain. He did say many funny and witty things, but certainly quotes are over attributed to him, I would say. But putting that aside, he wrote this delightful essay called The Awful German Language. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, yes, I know that one. I really like that one because he's poking so much fun at German. And I think he's got a point in many of the things that he says.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the title, the title is already a bit incendiary, but actually it's because he actually spent some time in Germany learning the German language. And so that's why he ended up writing this essay where he complains about the features of German that he finds extremely difficult for a learner, at least an English native speaker learner like he was. And he talks about all of these different issues and makes his suggestions for how he thinks German can be improved. And one thing he takes aim at is the compound words. Famously, he says, "These things are not words, they are alphabetical processions."
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, to his English language eye, they must have looked like monsters when you have a sequence of 44 letters and one hyphen like Aufmerksamkeitsdefizit Hyperaktivitätsstörung, which, by the way, is just the spelled out form of ADHD in German. Well, that looks like it's contrived, but it isn't. It's real.
These remarkably long compound words are really a hallmark feature of German, but English has compound words as well, though usually shorter, right?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, most English compounds are relatively short, but then there's also some longer ones. But if we talk about compounds, probably it's a good idea to consider what is a compound actually. I don't know if everyone out there knows that. So I would define compounds for the purpose of this podcast as a word that is made up of two or more words, which also occur on their own in the language. For example, bedroom, because a bedroom is a room that contains beds.
Yeah, when it comes to these compounds, in certain cases, it feels like it can almost be a matter of personal preference or style or even regional differences that decide whether someone chooses to spell it as two words or spell it as a compound word or spell it with a hyphen. English spelling is already notoriously difficult for other reasons. And so when it comes to writing these compound words, it seems all the more chaotic. In cases like the ones you mentioned, like bedroom, it's universally agreed, but not in all cases, right? Sometimes there's disagreement.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's quite a lot of compounds which supposedly, and not only supposedly, have different spellings. I mean, one example that you find in the literature is flower pot. How would you spell flower pot, Dominic?
I want to say that would be two words.
Yeah, I would say so too. But the literature also tells us it's apparently possible to spell it as a single word without a space or with a hyphen, which looks strange to me. And that's the thing. So I mean, we have certain intuitions about how words should be spelled. I mean, in some cases, it's less clear, but in other cases, it's a lot clearer. I actually got interested in this whole question of how compounds are spelled because I wanted to find out whether the German word Sandburg corresponds to the English word sandcastle. And then I typed that into the dictionary, a monolingual dictionary, and I spelled it as sand and castle with a space in between, but I got no results. And so I thought, oh, okay, is it not the correct word then? But then I had the idea, oh, wait a moment. So probably I should spell it as a single word or with a space. And I tried these two options and they both yielded different results. So in the case of the hyphenation, I got a list of suggestions saying, did you mean these words here? And only when I typed in the word sandcastle as a single word with no space, did I get the entry that I was looking for. And I thought, oh no, that can't be. I mean, how can something as seemingly unimportant as the spelling of this compound, which doesn't even have any reflection in how it's pronounced, how can that prevent me from finding what I'm looking for? So and that got me interested in this question of spelling compounds.
Yeah, I'm so surprised there because sandcastle, I would definitely spell as two words, I feel like. I mean, that's just my feeling. I wish I had something more scientific to go off other than it's just a feeling I have of what feels right as a compound word. But I guess these compound words can actually be closely connected to feelings, because I think maybe to some people this certainly must seem like an exceptionally nerdy thing to focus on. But actually people get very impassioned about these types of stylistic choices.
Absolutely. It matters a lot to people. And if you talk to people about spelling, they very often have preferences, very clear preferences and intuitions. But then, of course, sometimes the intuitions fail. And the nice thing is that in the research that I carried out, I actually noticed that these intuitions that you have, that I have, they're actually founded in certain statistical preferences that certain compounds have of being spelled with a space or with a hyphen or as a single word. And that actually allows you to bring kind of order into this chaos.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sometimes I envy mathematicians and engineers because math is very beautifully orderly. Language is a bit more like anarchy, but that's okay. That's what makes it fun and beautiful in its own way. And so, Christina, in your research, it seems you actually found a pattern for compound words. So can you tell me what you found?
Yeah, so what I actually wanted to do is I wanted to make a website. I thought I would test many different hypotheses based on a lot of language material. And that's what I did. And then I thought, okay, I'll take all the different features, like how long the words are, what part of speech they consist of, the frequency of the parts, the historical origin, whether any sounds, any letters clash at the boundaries and things like that. And everything that is relevant, I'll put all of that into the big statistics machine and then produce a website which people can use. And then they can just write in the parts of the compound and the website will tell them what, let's say, the likeliest spelling is. But the fun thing is it didn't work out like that. In the end, it turns out that if you do all of that and if you look at the many, many different reasons that determine why compounds take a hyphen or not, then you're left with a very, very easy rule of thumb. And you don't even need a website for that. You can just kind of learn it by heart.
Oh, okay. A rule of thumb. Okay. What is this? What is this rule of thumb?
It's actually very easy because the most important thing that you need to know is whether you want to spell an adjective, an adverb, a verb, or a noun. So if you want to spell a verb like to blow dry, use a hyphen. If you want to spell an adjective like world famous, use a hyphen. If you want to spell an adverb compound like well nigh, use a hyphen. So everything except nouns is basically hyphenated. So I think that already takes a lot of weight off the chest of someone trying to spell compounds.
Okay. All right. This sounds pretty intuitive so far. But we opened with talking about these really long German noun compounds, and we do have noun compounds in English as well. So what did you find there with noun compounds?
Well, I found something that completely supports what you said earlier, Dominic, namely, if you have a long noun compound in English, you use a space. And long already means that if you have two parts and one part has two syllables and the other part has one syllable, like in bathing suit, then you're going to spell it with a space in between.
That's a pretty low bar for it being a long word. It has more than one syllable. Okay.
Yeah. English is different from German there. I suppose a long compound would be different in German.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. You're right. Okay. Can you hit me with some examples here?
Yes, let's take some sweet stuff. Apple cake, chocolate cake. They're spelled with a space.
Mm-hmm. Oh, those are some nice examples. I like those concepts. What about other types of cake?
Well, there's other types of cake too. There's also cheesecake and cupcake and pancake. But, these are usually not spelled with a space, as you might have noticed.
Those are beautiful compound words.
Yeah, beautiful compound words, beautiful concepts. But in these cases, they're spelled as a sequence of letters without a space in between. And that is because they only have two syllables. So they're noun compounds with two syllables. Cheese, cake, cup, cake, pan, cake. And the second part has more than two letters, and therefore it's spelled as a single word.
All right, so cheesecake, cupcake, pancake, two single syllable words put together. I can understand that. But then, Christina, why do we check in at the check-in, but we check out at the checkout?
Because that's the last rule that is still needed to complete the picture. Because the word check-in as a noun, the check-in that you go to, also has two syllables. It's a noun, but the last part just has two letters. And in these cases, like check in or make up, there's a preference for a hyphen, at least in British English. And that's what I looked at. But of course, if you have the verb to check in, well, that is a verb that is not a compound. This is a so-called phrasal verb. So you just spell it with a space.
Yeah, phrasal verbs. English is littered with these, as is German. So I won't complain. I won't complain in German, but these things are very troubling for learners to get in, to get out, to get up, to get down, to get over, to get through. This must just be an absolute nightmare. But yeah, we have a lot of these compound words that are built out of these phrasal verbs. One that always trips me up is when you hang out with people, it's two words, but then if you had a nice hangout, it's a single word.
Yeah, because it's a noun, so it always depends on the part of speech. So in the end, the part of speech is the decisive factor. I didn't expect that. But then, of course, in research, you often don't expect the things that happen. I started that topic of researching the spelling of English compounds because I thought, that's a nice little thing to do after finishing my PhD thesis. And I'll write a nice little article about it, which helps me have an idea what to do when I'm in doubt. But then I spent many, many years working on this. But in the end, it became my habilitation thesis, my second big book, and I was very happy to have written it.
Oh yeah, and it seems to me it did attract quite a bit of interest when this was written about online. Actually, the comments were quite plentiful.
Yeah, that's true. It was very unusual for me because, this is a book that was published by Cambridge University Press. So I was very, very happy about that. A very good publisher and very serious as a topic, I thought. And then I was asked to do an interview with the Daily Mail, which is probably not the first, let's say newspaper you have in mind for covering academic research. But I have to say, it was fantastic, a wonderful experience with a journalist who really went into all the trouble of asking me questions about my research for a long time and doing her very best to portray it for a general audience. And that was really exciting. And then people, started commenting on it. I didn't expect that. Not all of the comments based on compound spelling only, but still almost 900 comments. That was a lot. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, fascinating, Christina. No, I can certainly understand the interest. I'm very interested in this. I'm actually really curious. A moment ago, you mentioned that perhaps there is a regional divide here. I don't know anything about this. Can you tell me? Can you explain some of that for me?
Well, I mean, the regional divide, I suppose you mean American versus British English?
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that I also did in this very long book was to try and test whether there's a difference between British and American English spelling. And I did expect to find fewer hyphens in American English than in British English. But in the end, the corpora, the text collections that I looked at, they didn't really differ, at least not drastically, from each other. But then it might be because the material was from the 1990s. So that actually contradicts my intuition about the way it should be. But of course, I mean, I just have to accept what my material tells me. But I will assume that in the meantime, I should find a lot more hyphenation in American English than in British English. So probably an update, a follow-up study would be timely.
Yeah. Those results make sense to me, at least, because I feel like sometimes when it comes to hyphenating versus compounding, it can be just a matter of personal taste or personal style. I wouldn't expect to find a kind of regional pattern, but you did. Why did you expect to see a regional difference?
Because that's what the literature told me.
Oh, the literature said that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That was the expectation. And I mean, it was also my intuition. I had the impression it should be like that. But then my material just didn't suggest that.
Nice. So in some ways you found what you expected to find, and in other ways you didn't. Okay. How did you go about investigating this?
I thought that if you want to find out for a new compound whether it's likely to spell with a space or with a hyphen or as a single word, then you need to look at those compounds that are always spelled as a single word or with a space or with a hyphen. And so I wrote to different dictionary publishers and asked them if I could have the headword lists from their dictionaries. And then I had someone write a script for me so that we could compare the different lists with each other and then see which words were always spelled in one particular way. And then I coded a lot of things for those words. So I coded how long they are, where they're from. I coded whether there are any letters that collide at the boundaries and things like that. And in the end, that's what I used to determine that spelling strategy that I told you about.
Nice. Writing a computer script to try and look into this. You're really putting the digital in digital linguistics. A headword list. What is a headword list?
So a headword is that word in bold print that you find in a dictionary, which is the word that you're interested in. Okay.
So just the words themselves and not their definitions.
Exactly. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. That is very cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. And I have to say, I'm very grateful for all the support that I received. I mean, from the dictionary publishers who trusted me to use their word lists, the support that I received in writing the program by Lennart Schreiber, and also from Anthony Unwin, who supported me with the statistical research. So at the time, he was a professor of statistics at my university, and I was very happy to have him help me to do everything in such a way that I would arrive at the best possible strategy.
Yeah, very nice. Well, not all of us have the dictionary on speed dial, so this certainly sounds like a really cool opportunity, a really cool privilege that you had here. So this strategy that you developed, well, a stopped clock is right twice a day. How confident are you that this kind of technique will work going forward?
I was very happy to find that the strategy works very well. So what I did is I got some texts and I looked at new compounds, and then I tested how well I could predict their spelling. And actually, it worked in 3 out of 4 cases, which is quite good considering that you have 3 different options to choose from. And in addition, what I also did is that I asked 2 English native speakers who are also experts on language to provide the spelling of compounds. And in the end, they did practically exactly as the algorithm did. So my spelling strategy is about as good as someone who knows English spelling really, really well. And I think that's really great news for learners.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this must seem so daunting for learners, but actually it's difficult for native speakers too. Sometimes I have to Google these things. I have to Google things in English all the time when writing, if I want my writing to be really, really strong. But I think one of the takeaways here is that, first of all, sometimes there's no consistency with some of these compounds, so don't worry about it too much. But if you are worried about it and you really want to make your writing if you want to apply some regularity to your writing, then Christina's wonderful rule might be helpful for you.
At least that's what I hope. Yeah. So I would say the basic takeaway is that the spelling of English compounds is not completely chaotic. So there's actually many, many different things that play a role. And that's why superficially you would think it's chaos, but it isn't. And so by applying that strategy that we talked about, and that can also be found on the website, for example, that is still around, you can just get an idea of a principle that will allow you to spell in a way that most people would say looks kind of right. And I mean, if the spelling strategy provides you with a spelling that you feel is not okay intuitively, there's also a list of reasons why that might be the case.
Yeah, you mentioned this website tool that you made. It's really very handy. So I think we'll include that in our episode description in the links if anybody wants to check that out. In the meantime, Christina, I think I'll go experiment with it and try to make some compound words.
Yeah, excellent. That's the spirit. And everyone else out there, why don't you do that too? So stay curious, have fun with language.
And join us next time on Linguistics Behind the Scenes.